The Southeastern Conference has some of the biggest stadiums in the world. They're also some of the best that college football has to offer. I'm gonna try to rank them, but as always, it's not a ranking that should be taken too seriously, as it's mostly subjective, and I'm closer to being illiterate than I am to being an expert on anything. First Bank Stadium. This is probably not a big surprise. The school isn't exactly known for its love of football, and the stadium sort of reflects that. This basic horseshoe structure is not only the smallest stadium in the conference, it's also the most boring or the least interesting. Whatever way you put it, it's dull. If I had to come up with a positive, well, in a week or so it'll be celebrating its 100th birthday, so it'll be getting a letter from the Queen. Oh, yeah. I just remembered. That's only for Commonwealth countries, my bad. Davis Wade Stadium. The oldest stadium in the conference doesn't necessarily look the oldest, but it's certainly not the most interesting design going round. There are two huge video boards, one of which has a unique section of seating underneath. Speaking of underneath, the team's original mascot, a bulldog obviously, is buried underneath the field. Some say on a quiet night, you can still hear a bark or a howl.
Oh my god, there it is.
Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. This has recently undergone some transformative renovations, which is a bit of a theme with the stadiums in this conference. Most recently it was the north end zone seating that has been rebuilt, as you can see. The end zone seating is the stadium's strong point for sure. I'm not such a fan of its exterior, especially when compared to some of the others coming up, but it's still a great stadium overall. Vaught Hemingway Stadium. The recent additions here are quite apparent, but even though they don't blend in very well, they have given what was a fairly simple single-tiered stadium some upper decks that are not only undercover, but have some nice red chairback seats rather than the same old aluminium benches. Still, it does look a little clunky. Maybe if the north end zone seating had that same upper deck, it would look a little better. Kroger Field. That was the lamest name for a stadium in the conference, but then Vanderbilt secured the first bank naming rights deal to take the cake. Perhaps not everyone is as obsessed with colour as I am, but I think those blue-backed benches make a world of difference to the stadium's appearance, compared with the plain metal variety. I know it makes little difference on game day, but I think it should be more common. Other than that, the stadium does have all its ducks in a row. In aisle 3. Foro Field. This is quite similar to Davis Wade, but it has some more interesting features, including the only proper grass berm in the conference. Most stadiums are just too big for one. And on that berm is the biggest letter M in the conference. Most teams don't consider oversized letters to be a priority. That's a shame. Also, the newly redeveloped south end zone looks great. Although it's still pretty simple, every element of the stadium comes together nicely. Jordan-Hare Stadium. I pronounced it the proper way this time, even though it doesn't sound right coming out of my mouth. I don't know, I look at that name and I think Jordan-Hare, but when in Alabama. It does have a huge video board, and more importantly, some rather nice hedges along the sidelines. However, there's not all that much else that stands out. It's a mostly bare concrete exterior and, despite Auburn having the best colours in my opinion, it's not all that vibrant on the inside. Williams-Brice Stadium. This stadium's biggest strength might be its nickname, the Cockpit. Not just because it's the home of the Gamecocks, but in the past, spectators up here could experience some turbulence, I guess you could say. Same as you would in a cockpit. It doesn't have many frills, but it's a solid stadium nowadays. I actually think this floodlight setup makes the stadium look that little bit better. One downside to this place is that it's a bit far from the campus, but you can always take the shuttlecock. I hope that's actually a thing. Gaylord family, Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. I do much prefer its nickname, the Palace on the Prairie. Of course, back in the early days it was just a little house on the prairie, but as you can see it's quite grandiose these days. Just stunning. There is a large disparity between the outside and the inside in terms of looks, but the recent renovations have made a huge impact. The stand behind the south end zone used to stick out like a sore thumb. Now it's probably the highlight of the stadium. Neyland Stadium. Although the Tennessee Riverside locale is quite serene, I haven't taken that into account, given that you could be anywhere once inside. But who needs natural beauty when you have a site like this? Unfortunately, the creamsicle colour scheme isn't as present as it could be when there are no fans in the house. They went a bit heavy on the beige, but there's still a decent amount of orange, most notably in those famous checkerboard end zones. It's an interesting stadium for sure. Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. There's a lot to love about this place. Firstly, the combination of modern and traditional design elements, with the brick facade and the angular nature of the seating bowl. You also gotta love that vibrant colour scheme of blue and orange. But there is one downside. It's called the Swamp for a good reason. It's a hot and sweaty experience. It's just a shame that there isn't some sort of great tasting beverage that can not only hydrate you, but replace your electrolytes as well. We'll have to make do with Gatorade for now. Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium. This is a very similar story to Gaylord, not just the impressive brick exterior, but the recent South End Zone expansion transformed it into a proper enclosed stadium. Except this one's a little better. They may have gotten rid of the Godzillatron, but it's been replaced with a wider screen, luxury suites galore, and just a better looking stand in general. Other than that, this unique boomerang shaped upper deck that wraps its way around the north and eastern sides makes for an interesting look. Tiger Stadium. I know this will be enraging some Cajuns right now, who I'd assume would consider their stadium the best. And for good reason. It literally gets so loud that it confuses seismographs into thinking there's been an earthquake. Every other week, it don't make no sense. But the structure itself isn't perfect. It's not in the best condition, and the extensions that have been added over the years don't really gel together well in my opinion. Having said that, it's still an extraordinary and unique stadium. Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's crazy to think that this has a capacity of over 100,000 and is only the fourth biggest in the conference. The big curved upper decks kinda remind me of the cricket stadiums in Australia, as much as a rectangular stadium can. Quite like them. This one in particular could even be described as a crimson tidal wave. Perfect synergy. Although the grand exterior is impressive, it isn't quite as awe-inspiring as the upcoming stadiums. Sanford Stadium. This one does just have a bare concrete exterior, which I mentioned as a negative earlier, but I just love the way that it appears to have been sculpted into the undulating landscape, as well as the view over the campus that some spectators are treated with. It also gets bonus points for the famous hedges that surround the entire field. Yeah, Auburn has hedges, but not end zone hedges, which can only be achieved if your hedge funds are managed correctly. Kyle Field. Well, a part of me didn't want to put this at number 1. It was my elbow, but it just has so much going for it. It's the biggest stadium in the conference. It has the most impressive exterior. I mean, just look at that. A good chunk of the stadium is pretty much brand new, and there are more chairback seats than at any other SEC stadium. If I had to try and point out a negative, well, The distribution of chairback seats leaves it looking a little lopsided, but that's understandable, considering what they have planned. So, there you have it. How wrong was I? Let me know in the comments. If you're new, please consider subscribing. I might even rank some other conferences' stadiums. Thanks for watching, have a good one.